Emily stepped into the bustling hallway of Willowbrook High, the sounds of lockers slamming and students chatting filling the air. It was her first day of senior year, and while most students were excited about the year ahead, Emily was just trying to get through it. She wasn't the type to seek attention or make waves. All she wanted was a peaceful year to finish her high school journey and focus on her studies. As she walked down the hallway, a voice called out, "Hey, look who decided to show up." She turned slightly to see Jake, the school's infamous bully, leaning against a locker with a smirk on his face. His friends were standing nearby, laughing and watching her every move. Jake was a senior, just like Emily, but he had a reputation that preceded him. Popular, rich, and always with a crowd around him, Jake had made a name for himself by making others feel small. He loved to pick on the quiet ones, the ones who wouldn't stand up for themselves. Emily's heart raced, but she tried to ignore him. She kept her head down, hoping he'd just leave her alone. But that wasn't going to happen. Jake stepped closer, blocking her path. "What's the rush, Emily? You always look like you're in a hurry to escape. Can't even take a moment to say hi." Emily tried to sidestep him, but he moved with her, keeping himself in her way. "Come on, don't be shy," he taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. His friends snickered behind him. At that moment, a chill ran down her spine. She knew what was coming. Jake had always been a jerk, but today he was determined to make her uncomfortable. "Leave me alone, Jake," she said quietly, trying to maintain her composure. Jake chuckled, taking a step closer until there was barely any space between them. "What's wrong, Emily? Did you forget to put on your armor today?" He reached out and pushed her shoulder lightly, just enough to make her stumble. Her breath hitched as she steadied herself. There was a moment of silence as Emily tried to decide what to do. She wasn't sure if she should fight back, but she knew she couldn't let him get away with this. She wasn't some helpless victim, and this time, she wasn't going to back down. Just as she was about to say something, Jake made a move that took her completely by surprise. He reached out, grabbing her wrist with a firm grip. "What's the matter, Em? You don't want to play?" he sneered. Her heart pounded in her chest. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. She felt trapped, unable to move, his grip tightening around her wrist. The laughter from his friends in the background faded, as her world narrowed down to that single moment. But then something inside her snapped. She wasn't going to let him have this power over her anymore. Not today. With a quick, forceful tug, she pulled her arm away from his grasp. She looked him square in the eye, her voice steady but firm. "Don't touch me again, Jake." Jake stood there for a moment, stunned by her unexpected reaction. His smirk faltered, just for a split second. His friends were quiet now, and even the hallway seemed to hold its breath. Emily turned and walked away, her pace quickening, but she didn't look back. The silence around her felt heavy, like the calm before a storm. She could feel the weight of their eyes on her, but she didn't care. This wasn't over. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emily's footsteps echoed through the quiet hallway as she made her way to the next class. Her mind was still racing from the encounter with Jake. She wasn't sure what had possessed her to stand up to him like that, but it felt different. Like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of knowing that the ripple she had caused would soon spread throughout the school. Jake wasn't the kind of guy who let things slide. She took a deep breath and pushed the thoughts aside as she entered her classroom. Emily wasn't one to talk much about herself. She preferred to stay under the radar, blend in with the background. Most of her classmates knew her as the quiet girl, a student who never caused any trouble, but always did her work and kept her head down. She wasn't shy, but there was a certain comfort in being unnoticed. It was easier that way. Her life wasn't exactly what you would call easy. Being raised by a single mum had its challenges. Her mother, Karen, worked 2 jobs to support them. Emily knew her mum did the best she could, but sometimes it felt like there was never enough time for the two of them to really connect. Emily often took care of herself, cooking dinner, doing the laundry, and even helping out with her mom's bills. There were days when she felt like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. Her friends, Sarah, mostly, tried to understand, but Emily never fully opened up to them. She didn't want to burden anyone with her problems. The closest she'd come to really letting someone in was Sarah. Sarah was her best friend, the kind of person who was always there to cheer her up after a rough day. Sarah had a way of making everything feel better, even if it was just for a moment, and Emily appreciated her more than she could express. But Emily had always kept her emotions in check. She didn't want to be the girl who constantly needed saving. She wanted to be strong, independent, and capable of handling her own problems. But the truth was, sometimes she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep it all together. Her thoughts drifted back to the moment with Jake. She'd never imagined that she would have the courage to stand up to him like that. She'd always avoided confrontation, always tried to stay out of the spotlight. But something had shifted inside her. Something had clicked when he grabbed her wrist. Maybe it was the years of pent-up frustration. Maybe it was the way Jake always seemed to walk around like he owned the place, pushing everyone down to make himself feel better. Emily had always been the target of his jokes and taunts, but today something was different. She was tired of hiding, tired of being quiet, and for the first time in a long while, Emily felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, she could take control of her own story. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Emily gathered her things and headed out into the hallway. She could already hear the whispers. The rumors were starting. She braced herself, but this time she didn't feel the familiar sting of embarrassment. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she quickly pulled it out to check the message. Sarah. I saw what happened with Jake. Are you okay? Emily smiled and quickly typed a response. Emily. Yeah, I'm fine, just tired of being quiet. Let's talk later. She hit send and slipped the phone back into her pocket, her mind already drifting toward the next challenge. She wasn't sure what was coming next, but for the first time in a long while she felt ready to face it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough? Jake couldn't believe it. He was standing in the same hallway, fuming, as the laughter from his friends echoed in his ears. He had made a fool of himself today, more than usual. He had never expected Emily to stand up to him like that. In fact, he didn't think she had it in her. He'd always thought of her as weak, an easy target for his jokes and games. But when she yanked her arm away from him today, that caught him off guard. He hadn't been embarrassed like this in a long time. Usually when he picked on someone, they shrank away, heads down, accepting their place in the school's social hierarchy. But Emily? She wasn't intimidated. She had looked him straight in the eye and told him off. The audacity. Man, you should have seen his face, laughed Todd, one of Jake's friends. He didn't know what hit him. Yeah, right, that quiet little Emily? Who knew she had it in her, added Chris, still snickering. She looked like she was ready to punch you, dude. Jake didn't respond, but his jaw tightened. He stared down at the floor, running his hand through his hair. He could feel the anger building up inside him. Emily was supposed to be one of those people who cowered in his presence like everyone else. But today, she had broken that illusion. What was it about her that made her so different? Why had she not only fought back but done so in a way that made him feel weak? For a brief second, Jake actually felt a knot form in his stomach. He had to admit to himself, that moment with Emily had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. She's just a freak, Jake muttered under his breath, trying to brush it off. She won't do it again. But deep down he wasn't so sure. There was something in her eyes, something he couldn't ignore. The way she stood her ground. It wasn't like any of the other times he'd messed with people. It was different. I don't know, man. I think she's finally had enough of you, Todd said, leaning in closer. Maybe it's time to stop messing with her. Jake snapped his head up. What did you say? His voice was low, almost a growl. Todd quickly backed off. I just meant maybe you should lay off. She's not going to put up with it forever. Jake's anger flared. I don't need your advice, Todd. I'll handle Emily my way. She's just another girl who thinks she can get away with disrespecting me. I'll make her regret it. Chris exchanged a glance with Todd, but neither of them said anything. They knew better than to argue with Jake when he was like this. The thing was, Jake wasn't just angry, he was embarrassed, and when Jake Harlow was embarrassed, it was never pretty. Later that afternoon, as the bell rang for the last class of the day, Jake stalked through the halls with a sense of urgency. He had to make this right. He needed to remind Emily who he was, but as he passed by the classrooms, he couldn't shake the thought that kept creeping into his mind. What if Emily wasn't afraid of him anymore? What if she actually stood up for herself from now on? The thought of losing control over people, especially someone like Emily, didn't sit well with him. He was used to being the one who called the shots. Emily had challenged him in a way he didn't expect, and now he had to fix it. That night, Jake lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, wrestling with his own thoughts. He hated the feeling of being caught off guard. It gnawed at him. He needed to figure out how to put Emily back in her place, how to remind her that she couldn't just defy him without consequences. And then it hit him. He knew exactly what he needed to do. The next day at school, Jake would make sure Emily understood that she had just crossed a line she couldn't uncross. But as he drifted off to sleep, a small part of him wondered, what if he was wrong about her? What if just maybe this girl could teach him something he didn't know about himself? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The morning air was crisp, carrying a hint of fall as Emily walked into school, her steps slow and deliberate. The halls were filled with the usual chatter, but today everything felt different. There was a tension hanging in the air, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She tried to ignore it, focusing instead on getting to her locker and starting her day as normally as possible, but it was impossible to ignore the whispers. The rumors had already started. People were talking about the scene yesterday between her and Jake. Emily had become the topic of discussion for the entire school. Some were curious, some were sympathetic, and others, they were already labeling her as the girl who stood up to Jake Harlow. And in a way, Emily didn't know how to feel about that. She'd never asked for attention, never wanted to be the center of anyone's focus. She just wanted to live her life in peace. But now it was clear that she couldn't hide anymore. And no matter how much she wanted to blend back into the background, there was no going back. As Emily stood at her locker, trying to get her books together, she heard footsteps approaching from behind. She turned and found Sarah standing there, her eyes wide with concern. "Emily, hey," Sarah said, her voice soft but with an underlying note of excitement. "Are you okay? You know, everyone's talking about what happened yesterday with Jake." Emily sighed and closed her locker with a soft click. "I'm fine, really. Just trying to get through today." Sarah bit her lip, clearly not convinced. "Look, you're a lot braver than I thought. I can't believe you stood up to him like that." "You must have been freaking out, right?" Emily smiled weakly, shaking her head. "I was scared. I mean, it's Jake. He's got this presence, and I've always just tried to stay out of his way, but yesterday when he grabbed me..." She trailed off, her words catching in her throat. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "But you fought back. That's huge, Emily," Emily shrugged. "I didn't really think, it just happened. I just knew I couldn't let him do that to me anymore." Sarah smiled, proud of her friend. "Well, I'm proud of you, but you know this isn't over, right?" Emily's smile faded and she looked away. "Yeah, I know." Across the hallway, Jake was watching. He had been waiting for this moment all morning. He had seen Emily with Sarah, talking, laughing, and it made something inside him tighten. He had made up his mind. Today would be the day he would put her back in her place. He hadn't expected her to react like she had, but now he was more determined than ever. No one disrespected him. Not without consequences. Not even Emily. Jake had spent the entire night thinking about how to make things right. He knew he couldn't just let it slide. His reputation was at stake. And if Emily thought she could get away with embarrassing him like that, she was sorely mistaken. His plan was simple, subtle yet effective. Jake had always known the power of influence. He knew how to get into people's heads, how to control the narrative. The key was to make everyone believe that Emily wasn't as brave as she thought she was, that she was just another girl who thought she could fight back and win. And today, He was going to make sure that everyone knew that Emily wasn't the one in control. Emily didn't even see him coming. She was on her way to her next class when she noticed a group of students standing near the stairwell. They were laughing, whispering to one another, glancing her way. At first she thought they were just talking, but then she saw the way their eyes lingered on her, and that's when she noticed Jake. He was standing at the top of the stairs, his arms crossed, watching her with that familiar smirk plastered on his face. His friends were gathered around him, looking equally amused. As Emily walked past, Jake stepped forward, blocking her path. The hallway seemed to quiet, the noise from the crowd fading as all eyes turned toward them. "Well, well," Jake said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "If it isn't the girl who thinks she can take me down." Emily's heart raced, and she instantly felt the weight of the stairs on her. She wasn't sure what to do, but she knew one thing for certain. Jake wasn't going to let it go. And he wasn't just going to let her walk away from this unscathed. "What do you want, Jake?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Jake's smile widened, a dangerous glint in his eyes. "Oh, I just wanted to remind you of something. You're not the hero of this story, Emily, and you're certainly not someone who gets to walk around thinking you can challenge me." The group of students behind him laughed, and Emily felt a tight knot form in her stomach. The whispers grew louder, and she could hear a few students murmur to one another, clearly intrigued by the confrontation. Jake stepped even closer, leaning in slightly as if sharing a secret. "You think I've been humiliated?" "Nah, I've been having fun watching you squirm. You can try to fight back, but in the end you're still just another girl who doesn't know her place." Emily's chest tightened, but she didn't back down. She met his gaze, refusing to let him see how much his words were affecting her. "I'm not scared of you, Jake," she said, her voice low but firm. Jake raised an eyebrow, clearly impressed by her defiance. He didn't expect this. "You should be," he replied quietly, and with that he turned, walking away as his friends followed him, still laughing. As Emily stood there, surrounded by the whispers and stares of her classmates, she felt a sense of dread wash over her. This wasn't over. Jake wasn't going to let her go so easily. But this time Emily wasn't backing down. She had already stood up to him once, and she would do it again. She just wasn't sure how far Jake would go to make her regret it. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The rest of the day felt like a blur for Emily. Every class seemed longer than the last, and the weight of Jake's words clung to her like a shadow she couldn't shake. No matter how hard she tried to focus on her work, her mind kept drifting back to that moment in the hallway, to the way Jake had looked at her with that arrogant, mocking smile. It made her blood boil just thinking about it. By the time school ended, Emily felt emotionally drained. She was exhausted, physically and mentally, but as she reached her locker, she wasn't surprised to see Sarah standing there, waiting for her. Sarah was her rock, and right now, Emily needed her more than ever. "Emily, are you okay?" Sarah asked, her eyes full of concern. She could tell her friend wasn't doing well, even though Emily was trying to mask it with a forced smile. "I'm fine," Emily lied, shrugging as she grabbed her things from her locker. "Just, trying to make it through the day." Sarah wasn't buying it. "You're not fine. You were great today, standing up to Jake like that, but I can tell it's eating at you. You can talk to me, Emily sighed, closing her locker with more force than necessary. She didn't want to talk about Jake, but the more she tried to push the thoughts away, the more they seemed to crowd in. She leaned against the locker and took a deep breath. I don't know what to do, Sarah. He's not going to stop. I can already feel it. He's making this his mission now, and I don't know how to fight back." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "Yeah, I figured. He doesn't let things go, but that doesn't mean you have to give in." "Emily, you've been through so much already. You don't let people walk all over you. Why should Jake be any different?" "I don't want to be the person who makes a big deal out of everything," Emily muttered. I just want it to stop. I didn't ask for any of this, and now it feels like he's out for blood." Sarah gently placed a hand on her friend's arm. I get it. You didn't ask for this, no one does, but you don't have to fight this alone. I'm here for you, and, well, you've already shown him you're not someone to mess with. Don't. Let him scare you into backing down. Emily bit her lip, torn between fear and the desire to not be afraid anymore. I don't know if I can do this, Sarah. What if I lose everything? What if he just makes things worse? You won't lose everything, Sarah said with quiet confidence. How you've got people who care about you. And you've got me. Don't let him make you feel small. The sincerity in Sarah's voice gave Emily a small measure of comfort, but the fear still lingered in her chest. She had never dealt with anything like this before. She had always kept her head down, never drew attention to herself. Now the whole school was watching her. And Jake. He wasn't the type to forget an offense like the one Emily had committed. Later, that night, after a quiet dinner with her mum, Emily found herself scrolling through her phone, the screen lighting up her tired face in the dim light of her bedroom. The usual texts and notifications filled the screen, but one message stood out. It was from an unknown number. Unknown number. I saw what happened today. You don't have to do this alone. Emily blinked, staring at the message in confusion. Who could this be? How did they know what had happened? She quickly typed a response. Emily. Who is this? A moment later, the reply came in. Unknown number. It's me, Rachel. I go to school with you. I've seen how Jake treats people, and I've always hated it. I just wanted to let you know that you're not the only one who thinks he's a jerk. Rachel. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had heard of Rachel before. She was quiet, but always seemed to stay out of the drama. Emily didn't even realize she knew her well enough to reach out. Emily, thanks for reaching out, but why? Rachel, I guess I just wanted to let you know you're not alone in this. I've seen the way he treats people, and you're not the first person he's picked on. But I've also seen how strong you are. You don't have to face him by yourself. Emily stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the screen. Could she really count on someone like Rachel? Was this a trap? But something inside her told her that maybe, just maybe, this was the sign she had been waiting for. Emily. What can I do? What if he just keeps coming after me? There was a pause before Rachel replied again. Rachel, you keep standing. Tall, I know it's scary, but I've been watching you, Emily. You've got this. And I'm here if you ever need to talk, or if you need help with anything. Emily sat there for a moment, letting Rachel's words sink in. For the first time since the whole ordeal started, she felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe she didn't have to fight Jake alone. Maybe, just maybe, there were others who felt the same way she did. The next morning, when Emily walked into school, the atmosphere felt different. The whispers were still there, but they were quieter now. She couldn't help but notice a few people looking at her with respect, nodding their heads as she passed. Some even gave her a small smile. She didn't know if Rachel's words had inspired this, or if the school was just starting to see her differently. But it didn't matter. Jake, on the other hand, didn't seem to share that newfound respect. As Emily walked through the hallway toward her first class, she saw him standing with his usual group of friends. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as he took in the change. She could feel the weight of his gaze on her, but this time she didn't flinch. She held her head high and walked past him without so much as a glance. He didn't intimidate her anymore, not today. The day after Emily stood up to Jake in the hallway, things started to shift. Just a little. It wasn't a dramatic change, but there was something new in the air, a subtle energy that made Emily feel different, like a small crack in a dam that hadn't quite broken. But you could feel the pressure building. She was no longer just the quiet, shy girl who kept to herself. People were beginning to notice her strength, and it felt both thrilling and terrifying. As Emily sat in the cafeteria that day, she noticed something unusual. The usual group of bullies who would snicker at her from across the room were silent. They were looking at her, sure, but there was no laughter, no mocking whispers. It felt almost like they were waiting for her to slip up, to show some sign of weakness. But she wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. She sat at the table with Sarah, trying to act casual, though her nerves buzzed beneath the surface. "Did you see Jake today?" Sarah asked, her eyes scanning the room. He was looking at you like he couldn't decide if he was impressed or pissed. Emily glanced over to where Jake was sitting, surrounded by his usual entourage. He wasn't looking at her now, but she could feel the intensity of his gaze from the corner of her eye. His expression was unreadable, but she knew better than to let her guard down. Whatever his next move was, she wasn't ready to face it alone. "I don't know," Emily replied quietly. "I don't think I care anymore. I'm just tired of being afraid." Sarah's eyes softened, and she gave Emily a gentle nudge. "That's exactly why you're winning, Em. You're not afraid of him anymore." Emily looked down at her lunch tray, not really hungry, her mind spinning. She had no idea what Jake was planning, but she couldn't let herself slip back into a fear. She had come this far. She wasn't about to lose her ground now. As the bell rang for their next class, Emily and Sarah stood up, gathering their things. Emily was almost to the door when someone called her name. "Emily, wait up!" She turned, startled, to see Rachel hurrying toward her, a smile on her face. "Hey, I was hoping I'd catch you," Rachel said, slightly out of breath. "I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing." Emily blinked in surprise. "I'm good, I think. I mean, things are weird, but better than they were before." Rachel smiled knowingly. "Yeah, I get that. But hey, I know it's not easy, so if you need anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. You've got people who've got your back now." "Thanks, Rachel, seriously." Emily's heart warmed. She wasn't sure what had made Rachel reach out, but it felt like a lifeline. Emily hadn't realized how badly she needed someone to show up for her until now. "Of course, I'll see you around," Rachel said with a wink, before turning and walking off toward her next class. Emily stood there for a moment, watching her leave, a strange sense of relief washing over her. Maybe it was the fact that someone else cared, or maybe it was just the feeling that things were beginning to shift in her favor. But for the first time, Emily felt like she wasn't so alone in this fight. As she entered her next class, she was still lost in her thoughts when the door slammed open. Jake walked in, flanked by his usual crowd, and the atmosphere immediately shifted. His eyes locked onto Emily's, and for a moment she swore she could feel the tension in the room thickening. Jake was a predator and she was his prey. At least that's how it had always been, but now it felt different. He wasn't just the king of the school anymore. She wasn't backing down, not like she had before. "All right, everyone settle down," the teacher said, snapping her fingers to get the class's attention. "We're starting with a new project today." Emily focused on her work, trying not to look up at Jake, but she could feel his gaze on her the entire time. It was unnerving, but she wasn't going to let it show. She focused on the words in her notebook, her hand moving steadily across the page. It was nearly impossible to ignore the presence of Jake and his friends at the back of the room. Every now and then, she could catch snippets of their conversation, laughter, whispering something about her. Jake was planning something. She could feel it in her bones. After class, as the bell rang, Emily gathered her books, but as she turned to leave, she felt someone tug on her sleeve. "Emily, hey, wait up." She turned and found Jake standing there, his usual smirk on his face. His friends were nowhere to be seen, but the danger in his eyes was unmistakable. "I didn't expect you to be so bold yesterday," Jake said, his voice cool and calm, almost too calm. "You should be careful. You're starting to make a name for yourself around here." Emily held her ground, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I don't care what people think anymore, Jake." His smile faded, replaced by a look of annoyance. "You should. You really should. I don't know who you think you're fooling, but you can't keep playing this game." Emily didn't respond right away. Her heart was racing, but she steadied her breath. "I'm not playing any game, I'm just standing up for myself. Something I should have done a long time ago." Jake's jaw clenched. "You think this is over? You think you've won? Think again." With that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy as they echoed down the hallway. Emily stood there for a moment, trying to steady her breathing. Jake hadn't made any threats yet, but she could feel the weight of his words. He wasn't going to let this go easily, but she couldn't afford to back down. "I'm not scared of you anymore, Jake," Emily whispered to herself as she straightened up and continued walking down the hallway, her footsteps steady. That night, Emily found herself back in her room, the weight of the day catching up with her. She wasn't sure what Jake had planned next, But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone in this fight anymore. The whispers in the hallway had turned into something else. They weren't just mocking her anymore. They were watching her, waiting to see what she would do next. And Emily wasn't about to disappoint them. The days that followed felt like a tug-of-war between Emily's newfound strength and the overwhelming pressure from Jake's relentless behavior. Jake wasn't letting up. Every glance, every word, every sneer felt like a challenge, a test of how long she could hold out. It was like she was in a battle with an enemy she couldn't predict. No longer was it just about avoiding his taunts and insults. Now it was a full-on psychological game. The cafeteria had become her new battlefield. Emily had been used to sitting in the same spot every day with Sarah, always on the edge of the room, out of sight, away from the center of attention. Now she didn't feel safe there. Jake and his friends often sat nearby, casting glances her way, their whispered conversations seemingly designed to make her feel like she didn't belong. But today, something was different. There was a strange energy in the air. It wasn't just the usual tension. It was as if the entire school was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Emily felt it as soon as she stepped into the cafeteria. It wasn't the usual buzz of idle chatter. It was more like the feeling before a storm, the air thick with anticipation. Emily took her usual seat, but today, Sarah wasn't there yet. She scanned the room and caught a few familiar faces looking her way, some with curiosity, others with obvious judgment, but there was one look that caught her off guard, a look of quiet support. It was from Rachel. Rachel had already seated herself at the table across from Emily, her expression calm, almost expectant. Emily blinked in surprise. Rachel was a quiet person, usually staying on the sidelines. The fact that she was here, sitting, in full view of everyone was a quiet act of defiance, and it made Emily's heart skip a beat. With a deep breath, Emily stood and walked toward the table. She didn't know if she could stand up to Jake on her own, but maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to. "Hey," Emily said as she slid into the seat across from Rachel. "Thanks for the, support." Rachel smiled, a soft, understanding smile. "Of course, we're in this together, right?" Before Emily could respond, a familiar, chilling voice cut through the room. "Well, well, if it isn't the two nobodies," Jake's voice boomed, and Emily winced, turning her head toward him. Jake was standing just a few feet away, flanked by two of his friends, Derek and Mark. His eyes were cold, scanning Emily and Rachel like prey. "You're making a big mistake, you know that, right?" Jake's smirk was a little too wide, a little too smug. Emily swallowed hard, but she didn't flinch. She wasn't going to let him see her fear again. Not now. "I'm not making any mistakes," Emily said, keeping her voice steady. "You're the one who's wasting your time." Jake's smirk faltered just for a second before it was back in full force. "Oh, I'm not the one wasting my time, Emily. I'm just getting started." With that, he turned and walked away, his entourage following closely behind, leaving a trail of whispers in their wake. Rachel gave Emily a reassuring smile. "You did great." Emily didn't know if she had done great, but she had stood her ground, and that felt like a small victory in itself. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emily's mind was on overdrive, trying to process everything that had just happened. Jake was playing some kind of game, and he wasn't going to back down, but Emily wasn't backing down either. Later that afternoon, as she was walking to her last class of the day, she felt a tap on her shoulder. She spun around startled and found Rachel standing there. "Hey, I just wanted to let you know. Jake's been trying to get to you, but he's not the only one with friends," Rachel said, her tone quieter now. "I know some other people who are sick of the way he treats everyone." Emily blinked. "What do you mean?" Rachel hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I mean, I'm not the only one who's noticed. There are others, people who aren't happy with what's been happening. They're ready to stand up to him, too." A sudden rush of hope surged in Emily's chest. She had no idea Rachel was so connected, or that there were others who were fed up with Jake's bullying. For the first time, Emily felt like she wasn't standing on this front line alone. "Thank you," Emily said, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't know there were other people who cared." "There are," Rachel said with a knowing smile. We've got your back." Emily stood there for a moment, trying to process everything. For the first time in a long while, she felt like things might actually start to change. Jake wasn't invincible. He didn't have the whole school in his pocket like he thought. There were people who were tired of his behavior, and maybe, just maybe, they were ready to do something about it. Later that evening, Emily found herself at her desk, staring at her phone. She had messages from Sarah and a few others, all checking in on her, making sure she was okay. But there was one message in particular that caught her attention. It was from Rachel again. "Rachel, I hope you know that you're not just standing up for yourself. You're standing up for all of us. We've all felt what it's like to be pushed around, and you're the one who's showing us that we don't have to take it anymore. You're more powerful than you think." Emily's eyes filled with tears as she read the message. It was a reminder of how far she'd come, how much she had grown, and maybe, just maybe, she could keep fighting. Not just for herself, but for everyone who was too afraid to stand up. As Emily turned off her phone and prepared for bed, she felt the weight of everything that had happened and everything that was still to come. But this time, the fear wasn't overwhelming. Instead, it was a fire inside her, a desire to keep going, to keep fighting no matter what Jake had in store. Because Emily knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going to lose this battle. The next few days passed in a tense, uneasy quiet. Emily could feel the storm brewing beneath the surface of her everyday routine. Jake and his friends had scaled back on their direct taunts, but their eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, were always watching her. It was like the calm before, the storm, a false sense of security that was bound to shatter at any moment. As she walked into school the next morning, the first thing she noticed was the air of whispered excitement that seemed to cling to the hallways. Her senses immediately went on high alert. Something was different, but she couldn't put her finger on it. People were talking, laughing, but there was something darker about it, something unsettling. By the time Emily reached her locker, she saw a small group of students gathered around. They were all staring at something with a mix of shock and disbelief. Her stomach sank. "What's going on?" Emily asked Sarah, who had just arrived beside her. Sarah's expression was tight with concern. "Look." She nodded toward the group of students, where Emily could now make out the object of their attention, a series of posters plastered all over the hallway, each one bearing her name and a mocking message. Emily's heart hammered in her chest as she slowly read the words on the nearest poster. "Emily Anderson, the quiet girl who thinks she's brave, she's just a joke." The cruel words were followed by a crude drawing of her face, exaggerated with an ugly, sneering grin. And beneath it, another message. "Let's see how long she lasts when everyone knows the truth." She felt the blood drain from her face. The posters were everywhere, each one worse than the last. Her name was smeared across the walls of the school, and the message was clear. "Jake wasn't going to let this go. I knew he wouldn't just back off," Emily whispered, her voice trembling. "But this is too much." Sarah reached out, touching her arm. Don't let it get to you. He's just trying to break you, to make you doubt yourself. Don't give him the satisfaction." But Emily couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation that gnawed at her insides. Everywhere she looked, there were people reading those posters, laughing, whispering, pointing. She felt like she was being suffocated, like her entire existence had been reduced to this cruel joke. The bell rang, and students shuffled off to class. But Emily couldn't move. Her legs felt like they were made of stone, and her heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't the battle she had signed up for. She wasn't prepared for this kind of attack. Sarah stayed by her side, her voice soft but firm. "You've got to do something. Don't let him win. Don't let him control you like this." For a long moment, Emily stood frozen, her mind racing. She wanted to run, to escape the eyes of everyone around her. But deep down, she knew she couldn't. This was the moment where she had to decide whether she was going to cower in fear or stand tall and face the consequences of her actions. Taking a deep breath, Emily turned to Sarah. "You're right. I can't let him control me. Not anymore." With newfound determination, she walked straight to the nearest poster, ripping it off the wall with a sharp motion. The action felt almost liberating. Her heart was still racing, but it wasn't fear. she felt anymore. It was anger, a fiery, raw anger that she had never known she was capable of. "Hey!" Jake's voice cut through the crowd, and Emily didn't even need to turn around to know it was him. "What do you think you're doing?" She slowly turned, facing him head-on. He was standing a few feet away, his usual smug expression replaced with an almost dangerous look. His eyes glinted, and his fists were clenched at his sides. "I'm taking down your lies, Jake," Emily said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm not letting you control me anymore." Jake's eyes narrowed, and the corner of his mouth twitched in annoyance. "You think this is over, Emily? This is just the beginning. You can't stop me." "I don't need to stop you," Emily replied, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I just need to stop letting you win. And right now I'm doing that." For a moment there was a tense silence between them. The crowd around them had fallen quiet, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Jake's eyes flickered between anger and something else, something almost like surprise. It was clear he hadn't expected her to stand up to him this way. Then, with a final sneer, Jake turned on his heel and walked away, his friends trailing behind him like loyal shadows. Emily didn't know whether she should feel victorious or fearful, but one thing was certain: she had made her stand. As the crowd began to disperse, Sarah came up beside her, a proud smile on her face. "That was incredible, Em. You really gave it to him." Emily couldn't help but feel a little smile tug at her lips. "I think I might be starting to get the hang of this." But despite her words, a part of her knew that this was just the beginning. Jake wasn't going to give up so easily, and the battle was far from over. She had no idea what he would do next, but she knew one thing for sure: she wasn't going down without a fight. As she walked into her next class, Emily felt a little lighter, a little braver. The whispers might still be there, but they didn't hold the same power over her anymore. She wasn't going to be anyone's joke, and maybe, just maybe, the tables were starting to turn. The aftermath of Emily's confrontation with Jake lingered in the air for the rest of the week. The posters had been torn down, but the damage had already been done. Whispers followed her wherever she went. There were some who supported her, but it felt like there were more who didn't understand, who couldn't or wouldn't see what she was up against. Sarah had been her rock, staying by her side through the silence, the stares and the occasional snickers. But something had shifted within Emily. The fear that had paralyzed her before was fading, replaced with a quiet, simmering resolve. Jake's bullying hadn't broken her. It had ignited something else inside of her, something stronger than she had ever known. But there was more to come, and Emily knew it. Jake wouldn't stop until he had humiliated her completely. The question was, how far was he willing to go? It was Thursday afternoon when the unexpected happened. Emily was sitting in the library, catching up on some homework, when she heard a familiar voice behind her. She turned around, expecting to see Sarah or maybe even Rachel, but instead it was someone she hadn't seen much of lately. It was Jake. Her heart skipped a beat, and instinctively her shoulders tensed. But something was different this time. He wasn't alone. Standing just behind him was a girl Emily barely recognized, someone from one of her classes, but who had never made much of an impression before. The girl was tall, with long dark hair, wearing a hoodie that almost swallowed her whole. She stood with her arms crossed, a guarded look on her face. Emily couldn't tell if she was a friend or just another one of Jake's minions, ready to join in the harassment. Jake's expression was still smug, but there was an edge to it, something colder than usual. "Emily," he said, his tone deliberately casual, "we need to talk." Emily blinked, unsure of how to respond. "About what?" Jake's gaze flickered toward the girl behind him. "This is Katie. She's got something to say." Katie stepped forward, her eyes avoiding Emily's for a moment, but then she met her gaze head-on. Her voice was low, almost hesitant as she spoke. "I'm not here to hurt you," Katie said, her words surprisingly calm. "In fact, I'm here because I think you deserve an apology." Emily's brow furrowed in confusion. "What? An apology?" Jake let out a dry laugh. "You heard her right. Katie here. Well, she's been watching what's been going on, and she doesn't like it." The tension in the room was palpable. Emily didn't know what to think. Katie's sudden appearance was strange. Why would she be standing with Jake if she was here to apologize? Emily wasn't sure if she could trust her, but something about her demeanor felt different from the others in Jake's circle. "I've been part of the problem," Katie continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't see it before, but now, after everything that's happened, I can't ignore it anymore." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Katie, the girl who had always stayed out of the way, was now speaking out. This wasn't the world she knew. There was no way Jake would have just let her step in and do this. "Why?" Emily asked, her voice guarded. "Why are you saying this now? And why with Jake?" Katie winced at the question, then glanced over at Jake, who was now avoiding her eyes. "Jake and we've had our issues," Katie admitted. "I've always gone along with what he wanted because I didn't want to be on the receiving end of his attention. But I can't be silent anymore. I've been watching what he's been doing to you, to others, and I hate it." Jake shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting Katie to speak up like this. "Katie, what the hell are you—" But Katie cut him off, her voice stronger now. "No, Jake, you're wrong. You're the one who's been wrong, and I'm not going to keep letting you hurt people. Not anymore." The tension in the library seemed to shift, the oppressive weight of Jake's influence weakening. Emily couldn't quite process everything that was happening. Katie, the quiet, seemingly uninvolved girl, was standing up to Jake, and the fact that Jake was letting her speak, letting her stand there beside Emily, made the whole situation even more bizarre. Katie took a deep breath and looked back at Emily, her eyes sincere. "I'm sorry, I should have spoken up sooner. I should have seen how much pain Jake was causing, but I didn't. I was too scared. But I don't want to be afraid anymore. And I don't want to stand by while he does this to you." Emily stood there, speechless for a moment, trying to process the gravity of the situation. She didn't know what to say or how to feel about it. She had spent so much time fighting, alone, but now here was Katie, offering her an apology and, more surprisingly, an alliance. I don't know what to say," Emily finally managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. "But thank you for saying something, for standing up." Katie nodded, and for the first time since their conversation started, she smiled, a small, hesitant smile. "You don't have to thank me. I should have done this long ago." Jake, who had been standing quietly, finally spoke again. His voice was sharp, and there was a noticeable edge to it. "You're making a mistake, Katie. You think I'm the bad guy here?" Katie looked him straight in the eye, unflinching. "I think you've been manipulating everyone around you, Jake, and I'm done being part of it." Jake's expression darkened, his temper flaring. "You'll regret this. You know that, right?" Katie stood her ground. "No, you're the one who's going to regret it. Not me." With a final glare, Jake turned and stormed out of the library, leaving Katie and Emily standing together, the air between them still charged with uncertainty. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. Then Katie spoke again, her voice quieter now. "Do you think I've made the right choice?" she asked, almost as if she were asking herself, not Emily. Emily took a deep breath, still processing everything. "I don't know. But I do know this. You're not alone anymore." And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, Emily felt a sense of solidarity, of real hope. She wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. She had an unexpected ally in Katie. The war wasn't over, not by a long shot, but for the first time in a long time, Emily didn't feel like the underdog. She felt like she had a fighting chance. The rest of the week was a blur of tense moments and whispered conversations. The news of Katie's unexpected stand against Jake spread quickly through the school. Some students were shocked, others were skeptical, but Emily felt the shift, even if it was small. It wasn't just Jake anymore. The power dynamics in the school were starting to change, and for once, Emily wasn't at the bottom. Katie had become a strange, unexpected ally. She had always been in the background before, one of those students who faded into the crowd, neither popular nor a target for bullying. But now she was standing up against Jake, and that alone made her someone people were watching. Some students saw her as brave, others as foolish, but no one could ignore her anymore. Emily tried not to let the whispers get to her. She stayed, focused on her classes, her studies, and what was most important, keeping her head high. But it was hard. Every time she stepped into the hallway, she could feel eyes on her, judgment in some and admiration in others. It was like she was walking through a minefield of silent opinions. By Friday, the tension between her and Jake had reached its boiling point. Emily was in the cafeteria, sitting at a table with Sarah and Katie, trying to eat her lunch in peace, when she saw Jake and his usual group of friends entering the cafeteria. It wasn't hard to spot them. Jake's presence was like a dark cloud hanging over the room. His usual posse was with him, but there was a different energy around them now. It was almost like they were waiting for something. Emily swallowed hard, trying to ignore the pounding of her heart. She wanted to be brave, to keep her head high, but it was hard. She had no idea what Jake would do next, and part of her feared that this was just the calm before the storm. But then something unexpected happened. Jake walked past their table, not saying a word. He didn't look at Emily. He didn't even glance at her friends. He just walked by, his expression unreadable, his eyes forward. His usual arrogance seemed to have faded, replaced with something else, something like uncertainty. Katie raised an eyebrow, glancing at Emily. "Did I just see that right? Did Jake just ignore you?" Emily blinked, stunned. She wasn't sure what to think. Jake had always made it a point to make her life miserable, to humiliate her whenever he could, but today he had done nothing. It was almost as if he was trying to act like she wasn't even there. "Maybe he's finally realizing that he can't break me," Emily said, her voice quiet but firm. Katie's lips curved into a small smile. "Or maybe he's just waiting for the right moment to strike again." The idea hit Emily like a ton of bricks. Jake wasn't giving up. He was just biding his time, waiting for the perfect opportunity to go after her again. But that didn't scare her. It made her more determined. "I won't give him that chance," Emily said, her voice steadier now. "He's not going to control me. Not anymore." For the rest of the lunch period, the three of them ate in relative peace. But Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing. She had seen Jake's kind of quiet before, when he was planning something, when he was plotting. And as much as she hated to admit it, she knew the storm wasn't over yet. Later that day, as Emily made her way to her last class of the day, she heard footsteps behind her. When she turned around, she found herself face to face with someone she hadn't expected. Rachel. Rachel was one of the more popular girls in school, and up until now, she had always seemed to follow Jake's lead. She had never said anything. Outright cruel to Emily, but she had never really done anything to stop it either. Seeing her now, standing in front of Emily in the hallway, made Emily's stomach tighten with nervousness. "Hey," Rachel said, her tone neutral, though there was an edge of something Emily couldn't quite place. "Can we talk?" Emily's first instinct was to walk away, to ignore her, but something made her stop. She wasn't sure why, but she had a feeling this conversation might not go the way she expected. "Sure," Emily replied, keeping her voice steady. Rachel glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Then she took a deep breath. "Look, I know things have been complicated. With Jake, I mean. I know I've never really said anything before, but I don't like how things have gone down. I don't like how he's treated you." Emily raised an eyebrow. "You're telling me this now, after everything that's happened?" Rachel nodded, her eyes sincere. "I didn't know what to do before. I thought if I stayed out of it, everything would just blow over. But I see now that I was wrong. I should have said something. I should have stopped him." Emily was stunned. She hadn't expected this from Rachel, not after everything. She had always been just another one of Jake's followers, someone who went along with his bullying and his cruel pranks. And yet, here she was apologizing. I appreciate you saying that," Emily said slowly, unsure how to process the sudden change. "But it doesn't change everything that's happened. I'm still dealing with the fallout." "I know," Rachel said quietly. "I know. But I want you to know I'm not with him on this. I never wanted you to go through what you've gone through, and if there's anything I can do now to make things right, I want to try." Emily felt a knot in her chest loosen, just a little. Rachel had never been her friend, but hearing her speak up now, admitting the mistakes she'd made something in Emily's heart shift. She wasn't sure if she could fully trust Rachel yet, but maybe, just maybe, this was a step in the right direction. "Thanks," Emily said, her voice soft. "I'm not sure what the future holds, but I'm glad you're finally seeing it for what it is." Rachel gave her a small, uncertain smile. I'm sorry it took so long." As Rachel walked away, Emily stood there for a moment, her thoughts racing. She didn't know what was coming next, but she had a sense that things were starting to turn in her favor. Maybe, just maybe, the tide was shifting. Jake wasn't going to give up without a fight, but Emily wasn't going down without one either. The balance of power was changing, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt like she was on the winning side. The week after Rachel's unexpected apology was strange. It wasn't exactly smooth sailing, but there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere at school. The usual whispers and stares still followed Emily, but they didn't feel as heavy. It was like the world had been holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, and now it was exhaling a little easier. Emily tried to carry on as normally as possible, focusing on her classes, spending time with Sarah, and continuing to grow closer to Katie. Sarah had been the first person to truly understand her struggle, but now with Katie's unexpected support, Emily was finding herself surrounded by people who wanted to stand by her side. That made her feel less alone in a world that often felt isolating, but even as things seemed to settle, there was a part of Emily that couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Jake had been quiet, almost too quiet. And while that could have been a good thing, it also made her uneasy. She had seen enough of his cruel side to know that his silence was just as dangerous as his bullying. One afternoon, as Emily sat in the library working on an essay, she noticed Jake walking by the entrance. He didn't look at her, but there was something different in his posture, something that told her he was plotting, and the way he glanced at her out of the corner of his eye made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. "He's up to something," Emily thought. "Do you think he's planning something?" Katie whispered, glancing toward the door where Jake had just exited. Emily bit her lip. "I don't know, but I don't trust him. He's been too quiet. I have a feeling he's just waiting for the right moment." Katie leaned in, her voice low but firm. "Then we'll be ready for whatever he throws our way." Emily smiled at her friend, grateful for the support. She had no idea what Jake was planning, but she wasn't going to let him catch her off guard. Not this time. Later that day, Emily and Sarah walked out of the school building together, chatting about the weekend plans when they spotted Jake with his usual crowd, standing by the gates. There was an intensity in his demeanor that Emily couldn't ignore. As they neared, she caught the tail end of his conversation with one of his friends. "They're just waiting for the right time," Jake said, his voice low but unmistakable. "We'll show them who's in charge." Emily froze. It was the same threat he'd always made, but now it felt different. There was something darker in his words, something more menacing. She exchanged a glance with Sarah, who seemed to read her thoughts immediately. "This isn't over," Sarah muttered under her breath, clenching her fists. "No," Emily agreed, her stomach twisting. "It's just getting started." As they continued walking, Emily's mind raced. She couldn't figure out what Jake had planned, but she knew one thing for sure. It was coming. And this time, she wasn't going to back down. The next morning, Emily arrived at school with a renewed sense of determination. She couldn't let Jake control her anymore, not with his whispers, his threats, or his manipulation. It was time to take back her power, to show him that he didn't own her. But just as she was making her way to homeroom, she was intercepted by someone she didn't expect. Rachel. "Hey, Emily," Rachel said, a nervous energy in her voice. "Can we talk?" Emily raised an eyebrow, a little surprised by her sudden appearance. "Sure," she said, though she couldn't help but feel wary. It had only been a few days since their conversation, and she wasn't sure where Rachel stood yet. They stepped into the hallway, away from the crowd of students. "I know this might seem weird, but I wanted to give you a heads up about something," Rachel said, glancing over her shoulder as if checking to make sure no one was listening. "Jake, he's planning something big. I overheard him talking with some of his friends last night." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" Rachel looked around again before continuing, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He's planning to spread rumors, bad ones, about you. He's going to try to turn everyone against you." Emily's stomach twisted with dread. It wasn't the first time Jake had tried to ruin her reputation, But something in Rachel's voice made it sound like this would be different. Worse. I thought he was done, Emily said, her voice faltering. I thought he was backing off. I don't think he's ever going to back off, Rachel said with a sigh, her face showing the guilt of someone who had been complicit in Jake's behavior for so long. I just thought you should know. I don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but I think it's going to be soon. Emily stood there for a moment, processing everything Rachel had just told her. Part of her wanted to scream in frustration, to tell Rachel that she didn't want to deal with it anymore, but another part of her, stronger, more determined, knew that she couldn't give up now. She couldn't let Jake win. Thank you, Emily said, her voice steady now. I'll be ready for him. Rachel gave her a small, uncertain smile. I know you will, just don't let him get to you. He's not as powerful as he thinks he is. As Rachel walked away, Emily felt the weight of the situation sink in. Jake wasn't done with her. He was going to make one last attempt to break her down. And this time it wasn't just going to be bullying. It was going to be a full-scale attack on her reputation. But Emily wasn't going to let him win. Not now. Not ever. The days after Rachel's warning were filled with anxiety and anticipation. Emily knew Jake was planning something, but the uncertainty of what exactly it would be left her on edge. Every time she saw him in the hallways, her heart would race, wondering if today would be the day he struck. But still, there was a part of her that remained calm. She had been through so much, and she wasn't going to let him break her down now. Not when she had come this far. It started on a Tuesday. Emily was in the middle of class writing an essay on symbolism in The Great Gatsby when she felt the first shift. A classmate, a girl named Lily, turned around in her seat, glancing at Emily before whispering something to the person sitting next to her. Emily didn't catch the words, but she could see the look on Lily's face. Something wasn't right. At lunch, Sarah leaned in and whispered, "Did you hear what Jake's been telling people?" Emily's stomach tightened. "No, what?" "They're saying you're a liar," Sarah continued, her voice low, "that you're making up everything about him bullying you. Some people are even saying you're the one who started all of it, that you provoked him." Emily felt the color drain from her face. The rumors had started just as Rachel had warned. Jake had begun his campaign of lies, spreading them like wildfire through the school. She had been the target of his bullying, but now he was trying to turn everyone against her, to make her the villain in her own story. "That's ridiculous," Emily muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never did anything to him." "I know," Sarah said, her tone fierce. "But people are listening. They're buying into it." Emily glanced around the cafeteria, seeing the familiar faces of classmates who had always been just on the fringes of the drama. Some were looking at her with suspicion, some with disdain, and it was only the beginning. As the days passed, the rumors spread faster. Emily could feel the shift in the air as she walked through the hallways. People who had once smiled at her now averted their eyes. There were whispers wherever she went, small, snide comments about her, comments that she couldn't escape. People looked at her as if she was the one to blame for the pain she had suffered. It was like the whole school was turning its back on her. One afternoon, she found herself sitting in a corner of the library, trying to focus on her work. But it was hard to concentrate with the constant hum of gossip around her. She could hear bits and pieces of the rumors that had already been twisted into something unrecognizable. It wasn't long before someone approached her table. "Hey," came a familiar voice. Emily looked up to see Rachel standing in front of her, her face etched with guilt. She had been one of the few who had supported her, but now, seeing her standing there, Emily wasn't sure what to think. "Can we talk?" Rachel asked softly. Emily nodded, setting her pencil down. She knew Rachel was the one who had tried to warn her, but right now, everything felt like it was slipping through her fingers. "What's going on?" Rachel took a deep breath, her gaze flickering nervously. "Look, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up. Jake's really going after you. People are starting to believe the things he's saying. It's like you've become the enemy." Emily's chest tightened at Rachel's words. The truth of what was happening was sinking in. It wasn't just the bullying anymore. It was the full-on attack on her character, on who she was. Jake had turned the entire school against her, and no one seemed willing to stand up for her. She was alone. "I'm not going to let him do this," Emily said, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration and resolve. "I can't just let him tear me apart. I have to do something." Rachel's eyes softened. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to fight back," Emily said, determination creeping into her voice. "I'm not going to let him make me the villain in my own story. I'm going to expose him for who he really is." Rachel hesitated, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You have to be careful. Jake's not going to back down. If you go up against him, it could get worse." Emily knew Rachel was right. It could get worse. But Emily wasn't afraid of that anymore. She had spent too long hiding, too long letting Jake have power over her. It was time to take it back. "I've been hiding for too long," Emily said, her voice firm. "It's time to stand up for myself." Rachel nodded, a sad but understanding smile on her face. "I get it. Just be careful, okay?" Emily smiled back, though it was tinged with uncertainty. She didn't know how it would all play out. But one thing was clear. She was done being the victim. Jake had made his move, and now it was her turn to make hers. Later that day, as Emily walked out of school, she saw the familiar face of Jake in the distance. He was standing with his usual group of friends, his posture exuding confidence. But as Emily walked toward him, she felt something shift inside her. She wasn't afraid anymore. She wasn't going to let him control her, not with rumors or intimidation. As she passed by him, she didn't look at him. She didn't need to. She knew that Jake was watching her, but this time she wasn't going to let his gaze make her feel small. She wasn't going to let him win. The next few days felt like a battleground. The rumors were everywhere, whispered in the halls, muttered, behind her back, and even posted anonymously on social media. Emily could feel the weight of every word, every glance, every sneer. It was as though she was walking through a minefield. Every step could lead to another attack. But even as the walls seemed to close in around her, something inside her refused to break. At first, Emily tried to carry on as if nothing had changed. She went to class, sat with Sarah at lunch, and did her best to focus on her schoolwork. But the rumors were relentless. Students avoided her, teachers seemed awkward around her, and every time she entered a room, the air felt heavier. Even Katie, the one person who had stood by her side from the start, seemed more distant lately, like she didn't know how to handle what was happening. It all came to a head on a Friday afternoon. Emily was sitting in the library trying to finish up a research paper. She'd managed to block out the noise of the school for a while, but her mind kept drifting back to the rumors. She was trying to focus when the sound of footsteps approaching interrupted her thoughts. "Hey, Emily." She looked up, surprised to see Jake standing in front of her. He wasn't alone. Two of his friends, Alex and Matt, stood behind him, arms crossed and expressions smug. Her heart pounded in her chest. She could feel the tension in the air like static electricity. Jake's smirk made her stomach turn, but she wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of showing fear. "What do you want?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Jake leaned casually against the table, his eyes flickering with amusement. "I thought we could talk. You know, about the things you've been saying about me." Emily felt a cold rush of panic, but she pushed it aside. "I haven't said anything about you." "Oh, really?" Jake raised an eyebrow, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Because the whole school seems to think otherwise. Funny how things work out, huh?" One of Jake's friends, Alex, stepped forward, his voice loud enough for anyone in the library to hear. "People are talking, Emily. They're saying you're the problem. You've been lying about everything. About Jake. About what happened." His tone was mocking. "Isn't that right, Jake?" Jake gave a small chuckle, clearly enjoying the drama. "Yeah, that's right. You've been spreading lies, trying to make me look bad." Emily's face burned with anger. She wanted to lash out, to scream at them, but she knew it wouldn't do any good. If she did that, she'd only give them more ammunition to use against her. "Enough," she said, standing up slowly, her voice trembling with a mix of frustration and resolve. "I'm not going to play your game, Jake." Jake's smirk faltered, just for a second. "Oh, really? Because you've already lost? You're the one people are talking about. You're the one they all think is a liar. You think you can just walk away from this unscathed? Emily looked him square in the eye. I don't care what people think, I know the truth, and you can't take that away from me. For a moment, there was silence between them. Jake's expression hardened, his eyes narrowing. He looked like he was about to say something else, but Emily wasn't going to wait around for his next attack. She turned and walked out of the library, her heart pounding in her chest. As she stepped into the hallway, she saw Sarah and Katie waiting for her, both of them looking worried. Sarah's eyes were wide with concern, and Katie had an expression on her face that was hard to read. "Emily," Sarah said, rushing over to her. "Are you okay? What happened?" Emily took a deep breath, shaking her head. "It's fine. It's just Jake being Jake." Katie placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't let him get to you. He's just trying to provoke you." "I'm done with being provoked," Emily said, her voice more determined than it had been all week. "I'm not going to let him control me anymore. I'm going to expose him for what he really is." Sarah and Katie exchanged a glance, and Emily could see the doubt in their eyes. They were worried about her. And, if she was being honest, she was worried too. Jake had a way of twisting everything around, of making people believe his lies. But this time Emily wasn't going to let him win. That night she sat in her room scrolling through her phone. The rumors about her were everywhere. Some of the posts were outright cruel, mocking her with pictures and captions that were far from the truth. Others were subtler, more insidious, like they were trying to convince everyone that Emily was the problem, not Jake. She couldn't let this go on any longer. As she sat there, staring at the screen, an idea began to form in her mind. She wasn't going to fight Jake with words or rumors. She wasn't going to get into a war of accusations that would only make everything worse. No, she needed to go straight to the source. She needed to expose Jake for who he really was. She grabbed her phone and started drafting a message to her. "Friends, we need to do something. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth. It's time we all stand up." The next day, Emily approached Sarah and Katie, her mind made up. "I've been thinking. We need to take this to the next level. We need to expose Jake's lies. I can't do this alone anymore." They both looked at her, their eyes full of concern, but also something else. Support. They knew it wouldn't be easy, but they also knew Emily was strong enough to do this. "Let's do it," Katie said firmly. Emily smiled, her heart filled with a mix of hope and fear. But one thing was certain. She wasn't going to let Jake win, not this time. Emily woke up that morning with a sense of purpose. The decision she made the night before wasn't an easy one, but it felt right. For too long she had been letting Jake's lies control the narrative. She had been hiding in the shadows, avoiding the truth, thinking that silence would protect her, but it hadn't worked. The silence had only allowed the rumors to spread, to take root. Now it was time to take a stand. She spent the morning gathering evidence. Every nasty post, every cruel comment from Jake's friends, every text message, she collected it all. She knew she needed to have everything in order if she was going to expose Jake for who he really was. It wasn't enough to just tell her side of the story. She needed proof that would make everyone see the truth. After school, she met with Sarah and Katie at their usual spot, the corner of the library. Both of them looked anxious, but there was something different in their eyes, a glimmer of determination that hadn't been there before. "I've got everything," Emily said, sitting down with her phone. "Screenshots of the posts, messages, everything. We can't let Jake get away with this." Sarah leaned in, scanning the images on Emily's phone. This is exactly what we need. But do you think people will believe us? I mean, he's popular. He's got all those people backing him." Katie's eyes darkened with resolve. "Doesn't matter. The truth speaks louder than anything else." Emily nodded, grateful for her friend's support. "Right. We're not just going to sit back and let him control everything. We're going to show everyone what's really been happening." The three of them spent the next few hours strategizing. They discussed how they would present the evidence, who they could trust to help them spread the word, and what steps they could take to make sure Jake didn't turn the tables on them. Emily knew it wasn't going to be easy, and that it would make her a target, but she wasn't scared anymore. She had nothing left to lose. By the end of the day, they had a plan. The next step was simple. They were going to post the evidence online. Emily wasn't sure how people would react, but she knew it was time to show the truth. The following day, Emily felt a knot in her stomach as she walked to school. The weight of what she was about to do was heavy on her shoulders, but as she walked through the front doors, she felt something inside her shift. There was a quiet strength that had been building in her, a confidence that came from standing up for herself when no one else would. She met up with Sarah and Katie at lunch, both of them looking just as nervous as she felt. "I'm ready," Emily said, pulling out her phone. "You sure?" Sarah asked, concern in her eyes. Emily hesitated for a moment, but then she nodded. "I have to do this for myself." Katie gave her an encouraging smile. "We're with you every step of the way." With that, Emily opened the app and began drafting her post. She included everything: the screenshots of the rumors, the messages, the photos. She explained what had happened, what Jake had done, and how his actions had affected her. She made sure to include a call to action for anyone who had witnessed Jake's behavior to speak up. She wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. She was fighting for anyone who had been hurt by Jake's cruelty. Before she could second-guess herself, she hit post. The seconds felt like hours as Emily stared at her phone, watching the post appear in her feed. She held her breath, waiting for something, anything, to happen. It wasn't long before the reactions started flooding in. "Wait, is this true?" one of her classmates commented. "I always thought something was off about Jake," another wrote. "Good for you, Emily. It's about time someone spoke up." Emily's heart raced as she scrolled through the comments. Some were supportive, others skeptical. But there was one comment that caught her attention, the one that made her breath catch in her throat. "It's about time someone told the truth. Jake's been bullying people for years. I've seen it and I'm done pretending it's not happening." It was from someone Emily had never expected. A popular student named Lily, the same girl who had whispered about her in the library weeks ago. She had always been in Jake's circle, one of the people who had been part of his posse. But now she was speaking out. The floodgates had opened. More people began commenting, sharing their own stories, supporting Emily. It wasn't just her post anymore. It was a movement. Students from all walks of life, from the athletes to the drama kids, the quiet kids in the back of the class to the ones who had always followed Jake's lead, were coming forward. They were sharing their own experiences, telling their own truths, and then Jake's name appeared in the comments. "Lies," he typed in all caps. "All of this is a lie. Don't believe anything she says." Emily's heart sank, but she didn't let it stop her. This was what she had been waiting for. His reaction only proved that she was doing the right thing. He wasn't used to being challenged, and the fact that he was lashing out meant that he was losing control. But Jake didn't stop there. Within minutes, he had deleted his comment, but it was too late. The damage had been done. His defensiveness, his panic, had only confirmed to everyone that he was guilty. Over the next few hours, more and more students stood up, sharing their experiences of how Jake had hurt them. Some of them were small moments, like cruel jokes or teasing. Others were much worse. It was clear that Jake had been bullying people for a long time, and now people were finally speaking out. They weren't afraid anymore. As the day wore on, Emily could feel a weight lifting off her shoulders. The fear, the tension, it was all fading. She was still nervous, of course. The fallout from all of this was inevitable. Jake wouldn't just let this go, and Emily knew he would try to retaliate. But something inside her had changed. She was no longer hiding in the shadows, and for the first time in a long time, she felt free. Emily's phone buzzed non-stop throughout the rest of the day. Each ping felt like a small wave crashing against her, each one reminding her that she was no longer invisible. For so long, she had quietly endured the bullying, keeping her head down, hoping it would go away. But now, there was no going back. Next morning, when Emily walked into school, she could feel the change. It was in the way the students looked at her, some with admiration, others with confusion, and a few still with hostility. But she had prepared herself for this. She knew that standing up to Jake wouldn't make everyone like her, and she wasn't doing it for them. She was doing it for herself, for the people who had been too afraid to speak out before, for the ones who felt just as trapped as she had. Sarah and Katie met her at the door, their faces full of support. Sarah was practically glowing, and Katie gave Emily a reassuring smile. "I can't believe how many people came forward," Sarah said, her voice a mixture of awe and relief. It's incredible. Emily nodded, still in disbelief at the response her post had gotten. It felt like a weight had been lifted from her chest, but she knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Yeah, but it's only the beginning, Emily said quietly. Jake won't just let this slide. He's going to come for us. Katie placed a hand on her shoulder. And we'll be ready for him. The bell rang and the students shuffled to their classes, but the hallways felt different. There was an undercurrent of tension now. Whispers followed Emily wherever she went, but not the kind she was used to. These weren't the whispers of mockery and lies. These were the whispers of curiosity, the whispers of people who were starting to see the truth. During second period, Emily's phone buzzed again. She picked it up, half expecting another barrage of hateful messages from Jake's followers, but instead it was a message from someone unexpected. It was Lily. Hey, Emily, the message began. I know this might be weird, but I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I've been part of the problem and I didn't realize it until I saw what you posted. Jake's been hurting people for a long time and I didn't see it. I'm with you now. You've got my support. Emily stared at the message for a moment, the words sinking in. Lily, who had always been part of Jake's group, was now standing with her. She quickly typed a response. Thank you, Lily. That means more than you know. But even as Emily felt a sense of gratitude, she knew that Jake wasn't the type to back down quietly. Sure enough, as the day went on, the whispers turned into murmurs, and soon enough everyone was talking about what had happened. By lunchtime, the school principal, Mr. Harris, made an unexpected announcement over the PA system. We've been made aware of some serious allegations involving student behavior. I want to remind everyone that our school has a zero-tolerance policy for bullying and harassment. We are investigating these claims thoroughly. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had known this would come, but hearing it out loud was still so real. The administration was taking action. She wasn't sure if they were truly concerned about the truth or just trying to manage the situation, but it didn't matter. This was her moment. The truth had come out, and there was no turning back. That afternoon, Emily was called to the principal's office. Her heart pounded in her chest as she walked through the hallways. She wasn't sure what to expect, whether this was a meeting to reprimand her for what she'd done, or whether it was a step toward accountability for Jake. When she entered Mr. Harris's office, he was sitting behind his desk, his expression serious, but not unkind. Another woman, a counselor named Mrs. Jensen, was sitting beside him. Emily, thank you for coming in, Mr. Harris said. We've reviewed your post, and we've been speaking with several students. We take these matters very seriously. Emily nodded, her hands trembling slightly. She wasn't sure where this conversation was going, but she was ready for whatever came next. First of all, I want to commend you for speaking out, Mrs. Jensen said gently. What you've done is not easy. It takes a lot of courage to stand up against someone who has the power to hurt you. I know this hasn't been easy for you, but you've given a voice to many students who have been silent for too long. Thank you, Emily said quietly, feeling a lump form in her throat. This wasn't how she had expected the conversation to go. She had been prepared for criticism, for punishment, but not for understanding. We're going to continue our investigation into the matter, Mr. Harris said, and we'll be speaking with Jake and his friends as well. I want you to know that we are committed to creating a safe environment for everyone here. Bullying will not be tolerated. Emily didn't know whether to feel relieved or apprehensive. She had always felt powerless in situations like this, but now the school was taking her side. For the first time in a long time, she felt like her voice mattered. I appreciate that, Emily said, her voice steady. I just want to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. And it won't, Mrs. Jensen said firmly. We're going to make sure of that. As Emily left the principal's office, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and hope. The road ahead was still uncertain. Jake wasn't going to just disappear, and the backlash would likely come sooner rather than later. But Emily had come so far, and she wasn't going to let him or anyone else control her anymore. The next few days were tense. Jake started showing up less and less at school, and rumors spread that he was laying low. But his followers were still active, spreading their own version of events, trying to discredit Emily and anyone who spoke out against him. It was clear that Jake was planning his next move, and Emily knew it would be coming soon. But she wasn't afraid anymore. She had the truth on her side, and for the first time in a long time she was ready to fight for it. The days following Emily's post were anything but peaceful. School had become a battleground, silent but charged with tension. She could feel it in the hallways, in the way people looked at her, in the whispers that filled the air. Jake had gone underground, keeping to himself, while his loyal followers waged a quieter war behind the scenes. Emily could hear them, the mocking, the subtle glances, the offhand comments that barely brushed the surface but were sharp enough to hurt. It was the quiet ones who worried her most. They were the ones who didn't say much, the ones who had been in Jake's shadow for so long that they didn't know how to exist without him. They didn't speak out, but their silence was loud. They would see her walking down the hall, make eye contact, and then look away quickly, as if she was suddenly invisible. But it wasn't just Jake's followers who were making their presence felt. Some of the students who had been the loudest, supporters of Emily's post, were now starting to pull back, unsure if they wanted to be caught in the crossfire. Emily saw it in their eyes, fear. It was as though they had thought standing up against Jake would be a heroic act, a way to earn the respect of their peers. But now, with the fallout starting to ripple across the school, they were rethinking their decisions. They didn't want to be next. Emily knew this was the silent war. It wasn't fought with loud accusations or visible confrontation. It was a battle of whispers, of stares, of shifting allegiances. She could feel the isolation creeping in, but she refused to let it consume her. This was the cost of telling the truth, and it was a price she was willing to pay. That afternoon, Emily received a message from Lily. "I need to talk to you," it read. "Can we meet after school? I think I know where this is going, and I want to help." Emily wasn't sure what to expect, but she agreed. She knew that Lily was in a difficult position. The girl had been one of Jake's closest allies, and now she was caught between her loyalty to him and the truth that was unfolding. Emily had no illusions about the situation. Lily was walking a fine line, and one wrong move could mean losing everything she had worked for. They met in the small park just off campus, a place where no one would be watching. Emily had no idea what Lily wanted, but she was ready for whatever it was. As soon as Lily saw her, she rushed over, looking flustered and nervous. "I don't know how much longer I can keep doing this," Lily said, her voice trembling. "Jake, he's not just going to let this go. I don't think he realizes how bad this is going to get, but I do. He's been talking to some of the other guys, trying to get them to back him up. He's planning something." Emily's heart sank. She had been expecting some kind of retaliation, but hearing it from Lily's lips made it feel all too real. She had always known Jake wasn't going to go quietly, but the idea of him plotting behind the scenes was a whole new level of threat. "What is he planning?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "He's trying to turn everyone against you," Lily said, looking down at her feet. "He's telling people that you're just making things up, that you're trying to ruin his life. He's spreading rumors that you're the one who started everything, that you provoked him, and now he's the victim." Emily clenched her fists. It wasn't surprising, but it still stung to hear it. Jake had always been good at twisting the narrative, making himself out to be the hero even when he was the one causing harm. He had a way of manipulating people, of making them feel like they were on his side even when they weren't. "Is anyone buying it?" Emily asked, her voice tight with frustration. "Some people," Lily admitted. "Not many, though. They're starting to see through him. But there are still enough of them who are willing to back him up. And I think he's going to try to make an example of you." Emily felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had expected retaliation, but now it felt like the stakes were higher. Jake wasn't just going to sit back and accept the truth, he was going to fight back, and he wasn't going to fight fair. "I'm not scared of him," Emily said, though her voice wavered slightly. "I've come this far, and I'm not backing down now." Lily met her eyes, her gaze softening. "I know, and that's why I want to help. I know things about Jake that could make a difference. He's not the person everyone thinks he is. He's been hiding a lot of things." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" Lily hesitated for a moment, looking over her shoulder as if making sure no one was watching. He's been using people for years. He manipulates them, makes them feel like they owe him something. He's got secrets, Emily. Things that he doesn't want anyone to know. Tell me, Emily said, leaning in. Tell me what you know. Lily took a deep breath, then looked around once more before speaking in a low voice. Jake's been dealing with some stuff at home, stuff he's been hiding. His dad, well, let's just say he's not exactly a model parent. There's been a lot of pressure on Jake, and he's been using that to justify his actions. He's been bullying people for years because it makes him feel in control. Emily's mind raced as she processed the information. This was big. This could be the key to understanding why Jake had become the person he was. It wasn't an excuse for his behavior, but it was a reason, and it could explain a lot about his actions. But would it be enough to convince everyone else? I don't know if anyone will believe this, Emily said, her voice filled with doubt. Jake has a lot of power here. He's been manipulating everyone for so long, I don't know if they'll care. Lily's eyes darkened. They should. Everyone deserves to know the truth, and you're not in this alone, Emily. I'm going to help you expose him. I'm not going to let him get away with this anymore. Emily's heart swelled with gratitude. She had come so far, and now, with Lily's help, the battle didn't feel as impossible as it once had. The road ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time Emily felt like she had a real chance of winning. She nodded, determination filling her chest. Let's do it. The silent war was far from over, but Emily wasn't fighting it alone anymore. She had the truth on her side, and now she had the support she needed to make sure it was heard. The school was on edge, the air thick with the tension of the unspoken battle that had become a part of everyone's daily life. Emily could feel the change in the way people looked at her as she walked through the halls. Some were still cautious, whispering among themselves, unsure of what side to take. Others, those who had once been silent or complicit, were now beginning to look at her with respect, or maybe even admiration. But it wasn't just the students who had changed. The teachers, too, seemed to have a different air about them. Perhaps they were finally paying attention. Perhaps they were finally seeing what had been going on right under their noses. And then there was Jake. After days of laying low, he was back. He walked through the halls with the same arrogant swagger that had always made him a figure of power, but there was something different in the way he carried himself now. The whispers that followed him had grown louder, more charged, and though he pretended not to notice, Emily could see the cracks in his facade. He was rattled. Lily had kept her promise. She had confided in Emily about the things Jake had hidden, the things he thought would never come to light. And Emily, with newfound resolve, had begun to piece together the puzzle. She knew now that Jake's life was a lot more complicated than she had ever imagined. His father's emotional abuse, his need for control, it all made sense. But none of it excused the years of torment he had inflicted on others. Emily wasn't out for revenge. She wasn't even sure what she was after. But she did know one thing. She needed to make sure that the truth was known. She wanted to expose the real Jake, no longer the confident, untouchable bully, but the broken, hurt person behind the mask. It wasn't about ruining him. It was about showing everyone that his cruelty had a reason, and that reason had nothing to do with making him a hero. But the more Emily uncovered, the more dangerous it became. Jake's anger was mounting, and his loyal followers were starting to turn on her, picking up where he left off, whispering things about her and her friends. They were trying to silence her, trying to make her second-guess everything. That's when Emily realized that she couldn't just stay quiet anymore. She couldn't wait for others to change, for the world to suddenly become a better place. If she wanted the truth to be heard, she had to fight for it. It started with a decision, a big one. Emily had reached out to her parents, to the school counselor, and even the principal. She had all the evidence she needed to back up her claims, her posts, messages, the testimonies of people who had been brave enough to speak out. And now, she was ready to go public. She wasn't going to let the whispers control her anymore. That afternoon, she walked to the front of the school during lunch. The courtyard was filled with students, some sitting in groups, others wandering between classes. She stepped up on a low brick wall and with the courage she hadn't even known she had, called out to everyone. "Listen up," she shouted, her voice firm, but filled with emotion. The chatter around her stopped as the students turned their attention to her. "For too long, this school has been a place where people are hurt, and no one does anything about it. For too long, we've been letting one person, this person, have control over everyone else." She pointed directly at Jake, who was standing at the edge of the courtyard with a smug look on his face. The crowd began to murmur, some people even taking a step back, their faces full of uncertainty. Jake's face turned a dark shade of red, his eyes narrowing as he took a few steps forward, his fists clenched. "You're crazy if you think anyone is going to listen to you," Jake sneered, but Emily stood her ground. "No, Jake, it's time for the truth to come out," Emily said, her voice unwavering. "You've been bullying people for years and now everyone knows it. You can't control us anymore." She looked around the courtyard, her gaze sweeping over the crowd, and for the first time, she saw something that took her by surprise, a flicker of doubt in Jake's eyes. "Jake," she continued louder now, "people are tired of being afraid of you. They're tired of living in fear of your words and your lies. We're not backing down anymore." The crowd was completely silent now. Jake's followers stood at the edge of the circle, unsure of what to do. The tension was palpable, and Emily could feel every eye on her, waiting for what would come next. "Jake, I know your secret. I know what's been going on in your life, and I'm not going to let you use it as an excuse to hurt people anymore. Your dad doesn't control you, and neither do you." Her voice trembled slightly, but she steadied it. "We all have our battles, but that doesn't give us the right to hurt others. You've crossed a line, and you can't take that back." Jake's face twisted in anger, but Emily could see it. The way his shoulders slumped, the way his hands shook, the way his eyes darted to the ground. For the first time, he wasn't the king of the school. He was just a person, someone who had tried to hide behind his power, but now the truth was starting to crack through the surface. "You think you've won?" Jake spat. "You think people are going to believe you over me?" Emily didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let the silence hang between them, feeling the weight of it. And then she said the words that would change everything. "No, Jake, they're going to believe the truth about who you really are, and it's time for you to face it." As the crowd began to stir, murmurs rippling through the students, Jake's followers slowly started to pull back. Emily's friends, Sarah, Katie, and even some people she didn't know, stood beside her, their expressions full of support. For the first time, Emily realized that she wasn't alone anymore. Jake, however, was not ready to back down. He shot Emily one last glare, then turned on his heel and stormed off, disappearing into the school building. Emily stood there, her heart pounding, but there was a weight lifted from her chest. She had said what needed to be said. The turning point had come. The silence had broken. And from that moment on, there was no going back. The days after Emily's confrontation with Jake had been a whirlwind. She had expected backlash, but what she hadn't anticipated was how quickly things started to unravel. At first, there was silence. No one spoke about what had happened in the courtyard, but the undercurrent of tension had shifted. By the next morning, things were already changing. The whispers weren't just about Emily anymore. They were about Jake. The school seemed to have split into two distinct groups, those who supported her and those who still sided with him, or at least feared him. But the balance had tipped. Jake's power, which had once been absolute, was now in question. His followers, the ones who had always backed him without question, were starting to waver. Some had stopped talking to him altogether. Others gave him nervous glances, as if they weren't sure if they should still align themselves with him or with Emily. Jake, however, wasn't going to give up his grip on the school that easily. He was plotting. Emily could feel it. That morning, as she walked into the cafeteria, Sarah pulled her aside. "Have you seen the latest post?" she asked, her face serious. Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What post?" she asked, already knowing the answer. Sarah hesitated before pulling out her phone. "It's Jake. He's posted something. About you. I think he's trying to spin the whole thing again." Emily's eyes scanned the screen as Sarah handed her the phone. It was a video. Jake, sitting in front of a camera, his face twisted in mock sympathy, was speaking directly to the camera. Emily wanted to make a scene, Jake said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. She wanted to be the hero, the one who takes down the big bad bully. But what she doesn't want you to know is that she's lying. All of this, everything she's saying, is just her trying to get attention. She's the one who started everything, and now she's trying to turn you all against me. You really want to let someone like her run the show? Think about it. Emily's heart sank. The video wasn't just an attack on her. It was an attempt to shift the narrative back in his favor, to make her the villain. The video had already gained hundreds of views. There were comments flooding in, some questioning her motives, others accusing her of being a liar. But what hurt the most was how easily people could be swayed. She could see it happening already. People who had once supported her were beginning to second-guess themselves. "Do you think anyone will believe him?" Emily asked, looking up from the phone, her voice quiet. Sarah shook her head. "I don't know. I'm worried, though. He's good at making people believe whatever he wants them to. And now that he's gone public, he might get more people to turn against you." "I can't let him win," Emily said, a surge of determination rising within her. "I've come this far, and I'm not going to back down now." But the question remained, what could she do next? The truth was out there, but Jake was still trying to twist the narrative. Emily knew that confronting him head-on again wasn't going to work. It wasn't just about calling him out in front of the school anymore. It was about exposing the lies he had woven and showing everyone exactly who he was, behind all the bravado and charm. That night, Emily stayed up late, scrolling through Jake's social media accounts, looking for anything she could use. She had always known he was manipulative, but now she could see it more clearly. He had a habit of posting just enough to make himself look good while subtly undermining others. He had been doing it for years, and Emily could see the patterns now, how he would provoke people and then play the victim when they reacted. Her thoughts were interrupted by a message from Lily. "I think I have something that can help you," the text read. "Meet me after school tomorrow. We need to talk." Emily's curiosity piqued. She didn't know what Lily had in mind, but she trusted her. Lily had proven to be a valuable ally, someone who understood what Jake was capable of. Whatever it was, Emily was ready to take the next step. The next day, after school, Emily met Lily at the park again. This time, Lily looked more serious than before. "I found something," Lily said, pulling out her phone. "Jake's been hiding something big. I've been looking through his old messages, and I found something you need to see." Emily's heart raced as she looked at the screen. It was a series of messages between Jake and a group of people. They were dated back a few months, and as she read them, she realized that Jake had been planning his attack on her all along. The messages were full of details, how to turn people against her, how to twist the truth, how to make her look like the villain. "Wait, this is—" Emily trailed off, her mind trying to process what she was seeing. "He's been plotting this from the beginning." Lily nodded grimly. "I didn't realize how deep it went until I saw these. He's been manipulating people for months, building this narrative so he could stay in control, and he's using everyone around him to do it." Emily felt a surge of anger. She had known Jake was manipulative, but to see it laid out so clearly, to see the extent of his cruelty, made her blood boil. "We have to show this to the principal," Emily said, her voice firm. "And we can't let him get away with this anymore." But Lily hesitated. "Are you sure? He's powerful, Emily. He has a lot of people on his side, and they'll back him up. If we show this to the principal, it could escalate things. People might start picking sides even more." Emily didn't hesitate. "I'm not afraid of him anymore. I won't let him destroy me. I won't let him destroy anyone else. We need to do this, Lily. It's the only way to stop him." Lily seemed to think it over for a moment before nodding. "All right, let's do it." Together they went to the principal's office the next morning, armed with the evidence they needed. The principal listened quietly as Emily explained everything, showing him the messages and detailing how Jake had been manipulating the entire school. It wasn't just about bullying anymore. It was about a pattern of abuse, both physical and emotional. Jake had created an environment of fear, and Emily was determined to stop it. After they finished, the principal promised to take action. "Thank you for bringing this to me," he said. "We will look into this immediately." It wasn't over yet, but it felt like a victory. The truth was finally out in the open, and Emily knew that she had taken a step toward ending Jake's reign. There would be more challenges ahead, but for the first time, she felt hopeful. The aftermath of Emily's meeting with the principal hit the school like a thunderstorm. For days, everything felt charged, like the calm before the storm. Teachers whispered in the hallways, students eyed each other cautiously, and the air in the school seemed thick with tension. Emily was on edge. She had done everything she could to expose Jake's manipulation, but now the ball was in the principal's court. Would he follow through? Would Jake's reign of terror finally come to an end? Emily could feel the eyes of the school on her every time she walked through the halls. Some students gave her nods of approval, offering quiet smiles or thumbs up. Others, though, still looked at her with suspicion, unsure of what to make of everything that had come to light. And then, of course, there was Jake. Jake had been noticeably absent since the meeting with the principal. He'd disappeared from school for a couple of days, and rumors had begun to swirl that he was being investigated. Emily had no idea what that meant or what kind of consequences Jake would face, but one thing was certain. His world was starting to unravel, so the days passed. Emily tried to focus on the positives. She had her friends, her family, and the support of people who believed in her. But the weight of what was happening, the fear of what Jake might do next, never fully left her mind. And then came the letter. It arrived in her locker one morning, a simple white envelope with no return address. Emily stared at it for a long moment, unsure of whether or not she should open it. Her heart raced, and for a split second she considered ignoring it. But something told her she needed to know what was inside. She carefully opened the envelope, pulling out a folded piece of paper. Her eyes scanned the words quickly, and her stomach dropped. Emily, I don't know what you're trying to accomplish. You think you've won, but you haven't. I'm not finished, not by a long shot. I'll make sure everyone knows the real you. Don't think you can get away with this. It was from Jake. Emily felt her breath catch in her throat. The letter wasn't just a threat, it was a warning. Jake wasn't backing down. He was still in control of his narrative, and he was willing to fight dirty to keep his power. But this time it was different. Emily wasn't going to cower in fear. She had come too far. She crumpled the letter in her fist, a surge of anger coursing through her veins. She was done running, done hiding. She had already taken the hardest step, exposing Jake for who he truly was. Now she had to finish what she had started. Emily's phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her moment of fury. She pulled it out and saw a text from Lily. "We need to talk. Something big just happened." Emily's stomach tightened. "What's going on?" she quickly typed back. Lily's reply came almost immediately. "Jake's back, and he's spreading rumors about you. But here's the thing, he's also trying to rally his supporters again. He's not giving up, Emily. He wants to make sure everyone knows he's still in control." Emily frowned, her thoughts spinning. "He's still trying to turn everyone against me." Lily's next message appeared. "Yes, but listen, there's a new angle. Some of Jake's friends are starting to question him. They're talking to people. They're telling them things. I think Jake's losing it. He's unraveling. We might finally be able to expose everything he's done, but we need more people to speak up." Emily's heart pounded. This was it. The opportunity she had been waiting for. "We can't let him win," Emily texted back. "We need to do something. Let's get more people on our side. Let's show the school the truth about Jake." The message came back quickly. And let's bring this to an end." Emily's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from Sarah. "Meet me at the park after school. I have something important to tell you." The park had become their meeting spot, their place of refuge. Emily agreed, then spent the rest of the day trying to focus on her classes, but her mind kept racing. Was this finally going to be the moment? When Jake lost everything? Was the truth finally going to catch up with him? The bell rang, signaling the end of the school day. Emily gathered her things and rushed to the park to meet Sarah and Lily. When she arrived, she found both of them, waiting for her near the bench by the trees. Sarah looked serious, her hands clasped in front of her. "Emily," Sarah said, her voice urgent. "Jake's supporters, some of them, are starting to talk. They're questioning him, but they're also scared. He's threatening them, just like he threatened you. But it's not just about him anymore, it's about everyone he's hurt." Lily nodded. "We need to get the truth out there, Emily. Everyone needs to know exactly what Jake has been doing." Emily's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Sarah took a deep breath. There's someone in Jake's circle, someone who's finally come forward. They want to talk and they're willing to share everything, the lies, the manipulation, everything. Emily's mind was spinning. Who is it? It's one of Jake's oldest friends, Lily said, her voice steady. And they have everything we need to take him down. Emily's eyes widened. This was it, the final piece of the puzzle. We have to act fast, Emily said, a surge of determination rising in her chest. We can't let Jake control the narrative anymore. Let's do this, once and for all. The three of them stood up, ready to move forward. This wasn't just about Emily anymore. It was about ending the cycle of fear and manipulation once and for all. The fallout had begun, and now they had to finish what they started. The following days felt like a countdown. Emily could feel the tension building as everything she had fought for was about to come to a head. The pieces were in place, the truth was about to be revealed, and Jake's time at the top was running out. But even with everything ready to unfold, Emily couldn't shake the anxiety swirling inside her. This was it, the moment she had been working towards. There was no turning back now. After school, Emily, Lily, and Sarah met in the park once again. They had agreed that the time to confront Jake was now. The final step was to expose everything. Jake's lies, his manipulation, his bullying, to everyone at once. The school needed to know what kind of person they were dealing with. We have the evidence. We have the witness. It's time, Sarah said, her voice firm. There was no fear in her tone, just determination. Lily nodded. The witness is ready. Jake's closest friend is going to speak up. They know everything about his tactics, about how he's been controlling people behind the scenes for years. If we get this out there, there's no way he can keep spinning his lies. Emily's heart raced. She had never imagined it would come down to this, exposing Jake's entire empire of fear in front of the whole school. But here she was, standing, at the edge of a cliff, ready to take the leap. She had to remind herself that this wasn't just for her. This was for everyone who had suffered under Jake's rule, for everyone who had been too scared to speak up. So here's the plan, Emily said, taking a deep breath. We'll gather as many people as we can in the school auditorium. We'll get the principal involved, make it official. When Jake shows up, he'll have no idea what's coming. Lily looked at Emily. Are you sure about this? Once we make this public, there's no going back. Jake won't just let this slide. He's going to try to fight back. I know, Emily replied, her voice steady. But we've come this far. We can't back down now. It's time for the truth to come out. The next morning, everything was set into motion. Emily, Sarah, and Lily had worked together to gather as many students as they could, quietly letting them know what was happening. They used every means they could to spread the word, texts, social media, and word of mouth. By the time the bell rang for the final period of the day, there was a palpable buzz of anticipation in the air. Students murmured in the halls, some excited, others nervous. They all knew something big was about to happen. As the final bell rang, Emily made her way to the auditorium. Her heart was pounding in her chest. The room was filling quickly. She could see familiar faces, friends who had supported her, people who had been too scared to speak up before, all gathering to hear the truth. And then, there he was. Jake walked into the auditorium with his usual cocky swagger. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Emily could see the familiar smirk on his face as he surveyed the crowd, but it faltered when he noticed the principal standing by the stage, waiting. The room fell into an eerie silence as Jake's eyes locked onto Emily, and a flicker of realization passed across his face. He knew this wasn't going to end well for him. "Emily," Jake called out, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "What's this all about, another attempt to ruin me?" Emily stepped forward, standing tall in front of the entire room. "No, Jake," she said calmly. "This isn't about ruining you. This is about showing everyone who you really are." "The real you, the manipulator, the bully, the liar," the crowd murmured. Jake's face twisted with anger, but Emily didn't flinch. She wasn't backing down. "You think you've won, don't you?" Jake sneered. "You think you can just waltz in here and destroy everything I've built?" "Built?" Emily's voice was calm, but it carried an edge. "You didn't build anything. You manipulated people. You used fear to control them, and now it's all coming to light. You're going to have to face the consequences of your actions. Before Jake could respond, Emily nodded at Lily. Lily stepped forward, holding her phone in her hand. The principal signaled for the lights to dim, and the room grew quiet. A video began to play on the projector screen. It was Jake's voice, but this time the message was different. This was the evidence they had gathered, the messages, the threats, the lies. Jake's own words, showing how he had plotted and manipulated everyone for his own gain. The video continued, and Emily could see Jake's face growing pale. He looked like he had been punched in the gut. The video didn't just show the bullying, it showed the depth of his cruelty, his calculated manipulation, and his attempts to turn everyone against Emily. He had been playing a game all along, and now the truth was out for everyone to see. The room was still except for the soft sounds of disbelief from the crowd. Emily could feel the weight of the moment. This wasn't just about exposing Jake. It was about reclaiming control, about showing the school that they no longer had to live in fear. When the video ended, the auditorium was silent. Jake was standing frozen, his face a mixture of shock and rage. The principal stepped forward, his voice firm and authoritative. "Jake, this behavior is unacceptable. We've already begun an investigation, and after everything we've seen, you will face the consequences. This is not something we can ignore." Jake's eyes darted around the room, looking for support, but it was gone. His followers had started to turn away. The tide had shifted. "This isn't over," Jake spat, but the anger in his voice was hollow. He knew it was over. His empire was crumbling. Emily stepped forward again, her voice steady. "It is over, Jake. For everyone's sake, it's over. This is the end." The room erupted into applause. Emily felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't just a victory for her. It was a victory for everyone who had ever been hurt by Jake. The principal nodded at Emily. "Thank you for your bravery, Emily. This wasn't easy, but it was necessary." As Emily left the auditorium, the weight she had carried for so long finally began to lift. It wasn't just about stopping Jake, it was about reclaiming her own strength. She had faced her fears, stood up to the bully, and come out on top. Emily had learned something important. When you stand up for the truth, when you refuse to back down, even the strongest bully can be defeated. Hit subscribe and leave a comment. With where you're watching from, this story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward even when things get tough?